supernatural about it, and certainly there's nothing religious about it.
Well, I'm glad you finally admitted that you do think a dog and a banana have a common ancestor, 500 million years ago.
Of course.
Look like neither one. Now, this is what you take by faith, though. You believe, and your God, you said, earlier, a religion involves a supernatural power. The supernatural power that you follow, with maybe not even realizing it, is time and blind random chance. You keep referring to over time or billions of years ago or whatever. You're welcome to believe that too. But again, then you just step outside of science and step into religion. You mentioned that the DNA is similar. I would agree. I think if you would go to your library, or any library in America, you would find all of the books written in English follow the same basic code. They all use the same 26 letters of the alphabet. Okay, that would be a very interesting scientific observation. As you look through books, you would say, wow, they're all using the same code. Okay, now, what does that prove? Does that prove they all evolve from each other, or does that prove that's the code with which you write English? And I think that's where you're misunderstanding and misleading people. You're looking at the similar DNA structure of different creatures and assuming that it means a common ancestor when it could just as easily mean a common designer. Mm-hmm. But you totally ignore to me, it's just the obvious.
Right.
This is a common designer that wrote the code.
Right. Well, of course it could be.
Well, why would you say that? You never say that to your class.
Oh, sure. My class is not a class about religion. So if somebody invokes within a scientific field or a scientific question, when examining a scientific question, if somebody invokes a supernatural entity, then that person is not doing science anymore. By definition, is doing religion, and therefore that's why I don't bring that in my classes. But of course, you're right in a trivial sense. I mean, obviously, anything could be explained with the intervention of a supernatural being. I mean, there is absolutely nothing that could, by definition, since a supernatural being can do whatever the heck he pleases, there is absolutely nothing, there's no observation that could possibly not be explained referring to the existence or the action of a supernatural being. The question is, why would you want to believe that, since you have a much more simple explanation that doesn't require a supernatural being? I mean, that's the crux of the matter here. It is not the fact that somebody has a proof that there is no such thing as a supernatural being. That proof cannot be obtained. Plenty of philosophers and scientists actually don't try that sort of stuff. But plenty of philosophers have tried for thousands of years both to prove and to disprove the existence of God. We know that it cannot be done simply because it can't be done logically, and it cannot obviously be done empirically because, again, any observation is compatible with the existence of a supernatural being. So by saying that, well, couldn't it be that was designed? Well, of course it could be, but that doesn't prove anything. Just because something could be proves absolutely nothing. Now, let me go back to your statement that I found very curious, that time, as you said, is a supernatural power. That sounds very odd to me. Time is something that we understand fairly well. It's got nothing supernatural as far as I can tell. And time is the way in which a lot of things happen. Continents move by accumulation of small movements over a long period of time. Now, if we were talking about continental drift instead of evolution, you would be asking me how silly you really think that South America and Africa were once joined in the same continent? That's silly. Look at them today. You cannot observe that happening. You cannot possibly. Nobody was obviously there. It's a completely crazy idea. Well, it may be a completely crazy idea that nobody can observe directly, but in fact we have very good indirect evidence, and we think that is exactly what happened, and it happened by small incremental movements over long periods of time. The same exact way in which bananas and dogs come from a common ancestor, by small changes over a very long period of time. There doesn't seem to be anything incredible in that. What is incredible, of course, what would be incredible is if evolutionary biologists claim that you can do this in a matter of years or decades. That would be incredible. That would be like a geologist claiming that continental drift actually happens over the lifetime of a human being. But nobody's claiming that, and so to be surprised that over the last 100 years, 150 years, nobody has observed that kind of big evolutionary change, it's really playing disingenuous because nobody's claiming that evolutionary changes go that fast.
Well,
now, let me one more thing because the thing about language. Then please be sure that you address this stuff on the time because it's really bugging me. But the language thing is very interesting that you use language as an example because languages do in fact evolve. They evolve over a small period of time. And as a matter of fact, the methods that we use in linguistics to study the evolution of languages are very, very similar to the methods that we use in evolutionary biology to study the evolution of living organisms. Essentially the same theory, except for the fact, of course, that there is no natural selection there. It's the evolution of language is driven by cultural processes, not by natural selection. But otherwise, the processes are so similar and the dynamics are so similar that, in fact, there is a very interesting collaboration that has been going on for now decades between evolutionary biologists and linguists. Languages do change, and with the way we know that certain languages are connected to each other, which means they derive from each other, is exactly by looking very carefully at the differences and the similarities among these languages. Pretty much the same thing that evolutionary biologists do with living organisms.
All right. Mr. Kent Hovind, I'm going to let you go ahead and finish respond to Massimo, then we're going to move on to the next topic.
Okay. He said his class is not a class about religion. He doesn't bring religion into his class. I can assure you, if he teaches evolution, and I know that he does bring religion into his class and doesn't even realize it or will not admit it. He's welcome to believe that a dog and a banana have a common ancestor, and he admitted that he does believe that. I don't care what he believes, but that's not science. It's true that we can see changes within the dog, but anybody that breeds dogs will tell you there are limits. You reach a certain point and you just can't. There's a brick wall. You can't go any farther. That happened with raising sugar beets. Years ago, the native wild sugar beet was something like 6% sugar or whatever the number is. They through selective breeding, were able to raise it to about 11%, and then they hit a brick wall. They couldn't go any farther. And that's, and anybody that raises anything will tell you, sure, you can get changes, but the changes are limited. Second problem he has in his logic, he thinks South America and Africa used to fit. I think you need to check that very carefully. You find out they shrank Africa about 35 or 40% to make them fit. There's no proof they used to fit. The shapes of these continents is a pure coincidence based upon the water level. I don't dispute that the continents are moving. I think that they are, but that doesn't prove they've been moving for millions of years. It doesn't prove anything. It certainly doesn't prove they used to be joined together. That whole Pangea theory is certainly a far cry from a scientific fact. You mentioned you have a simple explanation for the universe that does not involve a creator. I would sure love to see what that is, and I'd like to see some scientific evidence, not just the hypothetical could be, might have been, something I believe a pie in the sky stuff. Last, you brought up a bunch of topics here. I'm trying to cover them all. As far as time, that is indeed the magic ingredient, the God that solves all your problems. If I say, how on earth do you think a dog and a wolf, or a dog and a pine tree, or banana could have a common ancestor? You will say, well, we don't see this in our human lifetime, but over billions of years it happened. There you are, and you still don't see it. Yes, that is your God. Time solves your problem. You mentioned languages evolve. Then you don't understand what the word evolution means, because languages are changing because of intelligent input. Evolution wants to deny any intelligent input. So this is a vast difference. Computers are nothing but natural components, but that doesn't mean they form themselves. And yes, life is made of, 92 basic elements, but that doesn't prove that it designed itself. How you can miss that, I don't know, unless it's, what the Bible says, that, they're blinded because they don't want to believe there's a creator for some other reason. And I don't know about that in your case, but I would start looking there if I was to analyze this. So to me, it's obvious, certainly to most Americans, it's obvious there must have been a designer. And if you don't want to believe in him, that's your business. But if you want to use tax dollars to teach other kids that there is no designer, now that's my business.
Okay.